A blind baby seal was being slammed against volcanic rocks by every crashing wave, and no one was coming to save it. Then 30 penguins did something that marine biologists said should be absolutely impossible. They marched straight toward the crashing waves together. This is not a fairy tale or a movie scene. It happened in Antarctica in December 2025, all captured on camera. Cape Reshetnikov, Antarctica. One of the most remote and brutal coastlines on planet Earth, where temperatures rarely climb above freezing. Marine biologist Dr. Akari Tanaka had been studying a Gentoo penguin colony here for days, documenting their breeding behaviors and feeding patterns carefully. She knew their routines intimately, their calls, the way they moved between nesting sites and the icy feeding grounds every single morning. December in Antarctica means summer, but the ocean swells are relentless, sending massive waves crashing against shores made of jagged volcanic glass continuously. The black rocks along this coast are sharp enough to slice through skin, sculpted by millennia of brutal, unrelenting Antarctic storms and ocean erosion. On this particular morning, Dr. Tanaka was focused on her penguin senses when a strange movement at the waterline caught her full attention. Something small and gray was being tumbled in the surf, lifted and dropped again and again against the unforgiving volcanic shoreline with each wave. It was a juvenile Weddell seal pup, barely 3 weeks old, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, completely helpless against the powerful ocean waves. Each incoming wave lifted the tiny pup completely off the rocks and pushed it back down with relentless force that simply never stopped coming. The pup thrashed and rolled desperately, trying to find its footing, but every time it steadied itself, another wave knocked it sideways immediately. Dr. Tanaka noticed something deeply unsettling through her lens. The pup's eyes were wide open but staring at nothing, unfocused and milky white. Later examination confirmed the devastating truth. This seal pup was born with congenital cataracts, leaving it completely and permanently blind from birth. Without sight, the pup could not see waves coming, could not find safe ground, and could not navigate away from the dangerous, jagged rocks. It was trapped in a deadly cycle, pushed toward shore by each wave, then dragged back into the churning surf before it could escape. Every second the pup remained in that churning water brought it closer to exhaustion, closer to hypothermia, closer to a grim and silent ending. Dr. Tanaka watched with growing concern, knowing that Antarctic wildlife intervention requires strict scientific protocols and cannot simply be done on impulse or emotion. She was about to radio her team for guidance when she noticed something else had already taken notice of the struggling seal pup below. The Gentoo penguins nearest to the shoreline had completely stopped what they were doing. They were all staring intently at the water's edge. One penguin turned its entire body fully toward the struggling seal pup in the surf, its head tilted as if carefully assessing the situation. Then a second penguin turned, and a third, and soon an entire cluster of birds stood facing the churning ocean in complete, focused stillness. Dr. Tanaka counted them through her binoculars. Approximately 30 Gentoo penguins had gathered together, their attention fixed entirely on the helpless blind pup. What happened next defied absolutely everything Dr. Tanaka had learned in 15 years of studying Antarctic wildlife and animal behavioral science in the field. The penguins began to move, not randomly, not in their usual waddling scatter, but together, in coordinated unison, directly toward the breaking waves ahead. They walked in a tight group straight toward the surf zone, where the blind seal pup was being tossed, helplessly, among the sharp volcanic rocks. As they reached the water's edge, the 30 penguins spread into a precise semicircle formation between the blind pup and the open raging ocean. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their small sturdy bodies packed so tightly together that no gap remained between them, a solid living wall. This was not a random gathering of curious birds. This was a deliberate, coordinated formation, clearly designed to block the force of incoming waves. The next wave came crashing in, and instead of reaching the helpless pup, it broke against 30 penguin bodies, standing firmly in its path. The birds absorbed the impact together, their combined weight and density dissipating the wave's energy before it could ever reach the seal behind them. Wave after wave crashed against the penguin barrier, sending white spray high into the air. But the wall of birds held firm and never scattered. A single Gentoo penguin stands about 30 inches tall and weighs only 13 pounds. Alone, any one of these birds would be swept away instantly. But 30 penguins locked together in tight formation created a barrier strong enough to withstand the full, relentless force of the Antarctic Ocean's surf. The water that managed to pass through their living wall was reduced to nothing more than gentle foam and completely harmless light spray. Behind the penguin barrier, the blind seal pup finally stopped thrashing and lay still on the rocks, able to rest for the very first time. Dr. Tanaka raised her camera with trembling hands and began recording what she already knew was the most important footage of her entire career. The penguins held their formation without breaking, not for minutes, not for 1 hour, but for 4 continuous hours against the relentless Antarctic surf. 4 hours of standing in near-freezing water, enduring the constant pounding of waves meant for an animal they had no evolutionary reason to protect. These penguins were not defending their own eggs or chicks. They were not protecting their territory or their breeding partners from any visible threat. They had no nest sites anywhere near this stretch of rocky exposed beach. They had absolutely no personal stake in what happened here today. They simply chose to stand between a blind, helpless pup and the crushing power of the Southern Ocean for exhausting hours. Dr. Tanaka would later say, this was the most extraordinary event she had witnessed in 15 years of fieldwork on the Antarctic ice. She described it as intentional, cooperative, interspecies assistance, something the existing scientific literature says should absolutely not exist between penguins and seals at all. When the tide finally began to change and the violent surf started to ease, the penguins did something even more remarkable than simply standing guard. Instead of returning to their colony, they shifted their formation and began to actively guide the blind seal pup toward much safer ground nearby. 2 penguins positioned themselves directly in front of the pup, blocking its path whenever it tried to turn back toward the dangerous open water. Others nudged the seal's flanks with their beaks, gentle and insistent taps that steered the blind pup in the right direction toward safety. The blind pup could not see where it was going, but it could feel the warm presence of the penguin bodies completely surrounding it on all sides. It sensed the gentle pressure against its sides, felt the direction of their movement, and somehow it understood. It began to follow them willingly. Dr. Tanaka followed the procession at a careful distance, still recording every moment as the strange parade moved slowly across the dark volcanic beach. The group moved across patches of ice and around shallow tide pools, the penguins constantly adjusting their formation whenever the seal pup accidentally veered off. A tap from a beak here, a body blocking the wrong turn there. Never aggressive, never impatient, just calm and persistent guidance throughout the journey. Their destination was a sheltered cove, 50 meters to the east, where the water was calm and the rocky bottom gave way to smooth sand. When the blind pup finally reached the mouth of that protected cove, the penguin escort stopped walking and stood perfectly still together at the entrance. The penguins watched as the seal pup slid into the calm protected water and swam a few tentative strokes into the safety of the cove. Then, as if their entire mission was finally complete, the 30 penguins turned away from the cove and waddled calmly back toward their distant colony. No lingering, no celebration, just a quiet departure, as though what they had done was simply the obvious and natural thing to do today. Dr. Tanaka lowered her camera and stood alone on the Antarctic beach, trying to process what she had just witnessed over the past 4 hours. The seal pup was later carefully captured, examined, and tagged by Dr. Tanaka's research team for long-term monitoring and ongoing behavioral study in the region. The field crew named the pup Pengu, a small, affectionate joke honoring the unlikely feathered guardians who had saved its life that extraordinary morning. Against all odds, Pengu survived the entire Antarctic season, growing visibly stronger each week despite being completely unable to see the world around it. Researchers observed Pengu hunting successfully alongside other Weddell seals, using sophisticated echolocation and sound to navigate the dark waters beneath the Antarctic ice. Weddell seals are known for their complex underwater vocalizations. They produce an extraordinary range of calls that bounce off ice and surrounding rock formations. This blind pup had learned to read the echoes of its own calls against the ice, building a complete mental map without ever seeing anything at all. Pengu thrived, not despite its blindness, but because it developed alternative senses so acute that other seals could barely match its underwater hunting precision. Dr. Tanaka's footage was sent to the British Antarctic Survey, where behavioral ecologists reviewed every single frame with growing astonishment and professional disbelief. Their official conclusions stated that intentional non-kin interspecies assistance by a non-mammal species is exceptionally rare in all of recorded scientific literature worldwide. Penguins do not possess the neural architecture for empathy in the mammalian sense. They have no known biological mechanism for feeling another creature's suffering. They do not form cross-species bonds according to any known behavioral model. No scientific framework exists that can predict what these 30 penguins did. According to science, they should not have stood in freezing water for 4 hours to protect a blind seal that offered them absolutely nothing in return. Every evolutionary model, every behavioral framework, every theory of animal cognition says this event should not have happened, but it absolutely did happen. 30 Gentoo penguins formed a living barrier against the sea, and a blind seal pup that should have perished survived its very first Antarctic season. A marine biologist with 15 years of Antarctic experience recorded something her entire scientific training told her was impossible, and she knew it was real. But here is the question that keeps Dr. Tanaka awake at night. The one she still cannot answer after months of careful analysis and review. How did those penguins know the seal was blind? How did they understand that this particular pup needed help when hundreds of other seals did not? What signal did the pup send that 30 birds could somehow recognize? What language exists between species that science has not yet learned to hear? Perhaps there are forms of communication and compassion in the animal world that our instruments simply cannot measure and our theories cannot yet explain. Sometimes a wall of small birds is stronger than the entire ocean, and maybe that is a truth we are only just beginning to understand.